Hello. Today I'm gonna do something very different on this channel, which is giving a feedback session. This is something that I wanted to do for a while. It's something that I do in private with my friends, with my art friends a lot. And I really enjoy giving feedback. I enjoy receiving feedback, and I've been told I'm kind of doing okay at it. So I thought, why not use this skill and do something nice with it and help some people out. So I asked around if anyone would be willing to send some artwork in that I could give feedback on, and I've gotten some answers, so here I am giving some feedback. Today will only be one person because I ended up going a little bit in too much with this, and I ended up recording like a 20-minute feedback session when I only wanted to do like 5 minutes, but it's fine. Before I start rolling the clips, I just wanted to quickly come on here with a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm doing this feedback thing because I'm having fun doing it, and if it helps someone, then amazing. But I also want to be very clear that I'm still learning myself. I do not consider me to be like some sort of guru. I have been working as an artist full-time for 3 years now, so I feel like I have collected some experience, but I'm far away from where I want to be in my art journey. So yeah, I'm not standing here being like, I'm holier than everyone. I'm just trying to give something back to the community that gives me so much. Everyone that has followed me, has liked my posts, has any kind of interest in what I do in this channel or my artwork or my journey as an artist, that shit is amazing. And so if I can help you guys with going on your own art journey, then I will. Yeah, that's it. Roll the clip, roll the tape. Well, that wasn't awkward at all. Oh, and sorry if there's like the worst echo in here. I just moved and the walls in this room are really high, which I'm not used to, so I'm still trying to figure out how to do all the audio stuff with those kinds of walls, so sorry about that. I'll figure it out eventually. Alright, let's start with this amazing portrait by Esory. And by the way, I will place all of the social media, Instagram links and stuff in the description so you guys can find these people, give them a follow, give them a like. They deserve it. So this portrait, first of all, I adore this, okay? This is amazing. This is a really great portrait. This really looks like the character you were trying to portray, and that's the most important thing, and I feel it's also the hardest thing to pull off, and you pulled it off, right? So hats off to you, kudos to you, amazing. If I had to critique this, which, is kind of the point of this video, then there's 2 things that I would like to talk about. The first thing is that this character falls flat a little bit, and I will talk more about this in a second, and I will give you a paint over and we will talk about everything in detail and you will see what I mean as I go along. But that's the first thing. It reads a little bit flat. And the second thing is just shapes and edge control. So that has to do with the way that you use your brush to create shapes while you're painting. So I will do a little bit of an overpaint right now, and I will explain what I'm doing and why I think this could benefit your painting. And I'm just going to do what I personally would do if this were my piece. But it's not my piece, it's your piece, so ultimately you always can decide what you want to do and what not, right? You do not have to accept any piece of critique that you receive. I just wanted to say that. So, what do I mean by shapes and edges? What I mean by that is that in this painting, I feel like some of the shapes that you created with your brush while you were painting are not super strong. So a good example for what I mean would be this cheekbone. Right now, this shape here of the highlight, it is kind of blurry and it is not very defined. It doesn't communicate clearly what it's supposed to be and what the plane of the face is supposed to be. So what I will do right now is take a soft brush and I will just go over some of the shapes that you made here and soften them out a little bit. I'm gonna do that because I just want to establish the form first, and then after that I will go in and create more hard edges and clearer shapes. So I'm gonna soften a little bit, and this is something that I do all the time when I start with portraits. where I will just start with a very soft round brush. This is the standard Photoshop round brush, by the way, like it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And I will paint the shadow and the light in with the soft round brush. You don't really worry that much about edges. You just make sure that the light falls onto the planes of the face where it should fall on. So for example, the forehead here, I would honestly take this lighter shade and light this whole thing up, because the way that right now here's like a shadow, it doesn't really make that much sense that there would be such a harsh shadow here, because that gives the impression that his head is kind of folded inwards. And usually a forehead is actually kind of carved out. Is it concave or convex? It's concave, right? It's like going out. There should be a shadow like wrapping around the side here a little bit to show that it has a round shape, but there shouldn't be too much shadow in this area because it is round and it is concave. I hope that's the right one. I always mess up concave and convex. So right now this, what I'm doing by the way, looks kind of stupid. Just bear with me. So we softened the whole thing up a little bit. It looks like a horrible Photoshop airbrush accident. We don't want it to stay like this, right? So now I'm gonna take a different brush, and this can be any brush by the way. Just pick something that you like to work with. This is one of my favorite brushes because it's very bristly and it has a lot of texture to it. And this is not a brush that I use for details at all because it is kind of really rough around the edges, but it's very great for making some semi-hard edges. So right now I'm going over the edges and I'm creating sharp edges where I think personally should be sharp edges. So in this case, where it hits these dark shadow areas, I want there to be more of a contrast. So I will make it a little bit less blurry. Same down here where it hits the darker shadows, I will add a little bit more of an edge. Now going back to thinking about where the light would hit realistically, the nose to me seems kind of off because the light is kind of coming from this side, right? This is where the really strong light here hits, but the nose has this shadow here. I don't know what I'm doing, but this shadow. That doesn't really make sense, right? Because if the light is hitting from this side, why would there be a shadow right here? And of course, the face does have planes, and some of these planes will face away from the light and create a bit of a shadow. But this shadow is pretty harsh, in my opinion, considering that the light is coming from this angle. So what I will do is I will take this light color and I will extend it a bit to where I think it would hit the nose. And then I will remove a little bit of the shadow here. You can still have a little bit of shadow there, right? But not that much. I really like the dark shadow around the eye. I want to keep that. But I want to make sure that the nose reads as more 3D. Let's talk about rim light now. Rim light can flatten the image, especially if you use rim lights from both sides. And you can absolutely use rim light in a way where it just has this very, very thin line at the very edge of the character. That's totally fine. But if you use this from both sides, you will kind of create this almost graphic effect where it will take away a lot from the form and the volume of your painting because it just hits the outer edge. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this light color and I'm gonna wrap it around a little bit more where I personally feel it would wrap around. And by the way, if you do this yourself, use reference, right? I'm not using any reference right now because I have somewhat of an idea because I've done this a couple of times before, but if you cannot figure out where the light should hit, use a reference. There's absolutely no shame in using reference. I would also like to remove the light down here at the jaw because technically if the light is coming from here, you wouldn't hit the jaw on this side. That side of the jaw is turning away from the light source, right? So I'm just gonna remove that light down here. And you can have it wrap around a little bit to show that it is 3D, but I don't think it should extend too much to the other side. And you still have a contrast with your neck down here. All right, let me see. what we have done so far. It's still kind of soft in some areas, so I will kind of reintroduce a little bit more of those brush strokes, because we really don't want him to look like one of those, I don't know, Instagram Betty Photoshop fails. I will actually remove this light here by the ear as well, because again, the ear wraps away from the head, from the light source. So it shouldn't have any of this light source, right? However, it is facing this blue light source, so we can absolutely add some of that blue rim light to it. I have purposely, by the way, chosen a brush that is not amazing for details, because I really want to focus on the broad shapes, and I don't want to go into detail with this paint over too much, because then I would sit here for 3 hours and no one benefits from that. So just know that if you want to apply any of the things that I'm doing, you can totally use a brush that is a bit more forgiving and allows you to create more details. I will light this part up a little bit, because it is very dark and there's a lot of contrast there that kind of takes away from the rest of the face. And this is enough, right? This kind of change in values, and by values I mean how light or how dark this is, just in case anyone is watching this who doesn't know what the term values means. Value means the lightness of a color or an image. Before, we had this very intense contrast between this dark area and this lighter area, and areas of contrast pull focus. So usually the area that has the most contrast is what I will look at the first. Right now this is this area for sure. There's the most contrast in value and lightness and darkness here, but then this also has a lot of contrast, and I don't think you want people to look at his jawline so much, and maybe more look at his eyes or his nose or his mouth or whatever. So that's why I lightened that up a little bit. And I'm also gonna take away some of the contrast in the ear. And I actually want to introduce a little bit more of redness to the ear. This is a personal preference, but I personally really like it if you show a little bit of subsurface scattering. Subsurface scattering is a very fancy term, but it just means that if light shines through a surface that is kind of a little bit translucent, it will scatter beneath the surface. So in case of skin, when there's light that kind of hits the ear from behind, the light kind of enters the ear, and then the light kind of scatters inside of the ear, like under the skin, and so it will glow a little bit in this orangey light. I also think that the shadow under the nose is a bit too harsh. I think we can lighten it up a little bit. And I will go back and add some more detail in the nostrils later, or you can go back and add them later, because this is meant to be more of a fast overpainting. And then I will also light this area just ever so slightly, just take a little bit of the contrast out, and then we can take this light color and actually kind of introduce back some of the form through using light, the way that it would hit maybe here. Up here, again, the rim light, it's only hitting like the outer edge of the hair. And if we want it to look a little bit more 3D, we will bring the rim light in a lot more. We'll also flip this again. By the way, I use this all the time, so I really recommend that you create a shortcut for flipping. So what I'm doing right now is, first of all, raising the opacity, because I'm painting on 50%, and right now I want to create strong shapes. So I want to be on 100% so that every mark I put down will be a very strong shape. I will wrap this around a little bit more. And I'm just breaking apart the hair a little bit, but keeping it in clusters, right? Because I feel like the key to like believable hair is not to get lost into details too much, and don't like draw a billion different strands. Keep it in clusters, and you can add a little bit of detail, a little bit, like a few strands here and there, but generally you want to keep like broader shapes. At least that's what I found kind of helps me when I paint hair. I really like how this hair kind of swoops up here, so I'll add a few more of those. And I feel like especially with rim light you can do like really really great stuff with adding like some kind of small baby hat. Obviously, when you do this with a lot more care than what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to kind of speed through this. This also adds a little bit more of movement. You can also do the same thing with the blue here at the side if you want to. The blue one I will also wrap around a little bit. And you will notice that I don't use undo a lot. I use it for sure, like don't feel like you can't use undo. You can do whatever you want. But I personally just, if I make a mistake or I make a brush stroke that I don't like, I would personally rather just go in and pick another color and then paint over it like you would in a traditional painting, because I think that kind of gives your artwork more of a painterly feeling and a painterly quality to it. But of course, if I fuck up like big time, I will absolutely undo. Or if it's something that would just be a pain in the ass to paint over again. So I'll add a few more strokes here, but generally keep the bigger clusters of hair. We'll also bring this lighter color down a little bit more, because again, the shadow here is pretty harsh. This is still very, very soft. We really don't want that. Way too airbrushed. I think I overdid it with the airbrush actually a little bit. So maybe don't do it that much. I'm bringing some of that skin color into the lip, because that's something that I noticed with people's bottom lips. The upper lip will usually have a lot more contrast, and in this case you also added some redness, which is great, I think. And then the lower lip kind of blends at the edge into the skin tone, right? And I think we should also fix the mouth a little bit, just anatomically. I think it doesn't really, yeah. If we look at it flipped, his face here, facing in this direction, right? This is the worst brush for this, I'm sorry. Let me do this again. Here's the tip of the nose, that's the center. And then the center of the mouth is kind of here, right? So it's a bit off. So the center of the mouth should be somewhere around the center of the nose, closer to the center of the nose. So what I will do, this is my paint over, right? I will just merge this with the original. Let's call this paint over. So now it's all on one layer. And then I will press Ctrl-Shift-X, which will bring us to the liquify tool. And then I will very, very carefully move this mouth over to the left. And this is such a trial and error thing. Sometimes you have to undo a bunch of times, try again, undo, and just see what action gives you the result you're looking for. So I'm just gonna move this over a little bit so it just looks like it wraps around more the face. So if you use a lot of liquify, it will definitely blur your image a little bit. So use it very carefully. And now I will just go in, fix the mouth a little bit more. Again, taking some of the shadow out, some of the harsh shadow. And then there's usually a little bit of highlight as well in the corner. Yeah. So what we did so far is just take out a lot of the contrast in this area, smooth some of these shapes out. And honestly, they're still a little bit too smooth in some areas. You kind of lost some of that contrast that maybe we want here. I think just overall we could darken the highlight on the edge here as well, because it's very bright and it's kind of blown out. Let me talk about the lower part really quick, because I want to wrap this up. For the part down here, I would actually remove this light, all of this light, because again, this is kind of the same color than the light that's coming from the left, right? And that just doesn't make sense that it would be here. And then this dark part here kind of really blends into the rest of the jacket. So I will just light this part up so we can tell it's two different objects essentially, or two different planes. And then I will also light the jacket up a little bit because it's quite dark. And again, you really don't need that much of contrast, especially in areas where you don't want the focus to be. You don't want the focus to be around this part of the jacket, right? So the contrast really doesn't need to be that high. I will add a little bit of the blue light here to show that this also hits this. That's a bit lighter. And then here, kind of the same thing, honestly. This part is kind of the shadow part, right? And then this here really blends into that. So I would maybe take some of this lighter color and just lighten it up, because that way this shadow shape reads a lot more as an actual shadow shape. You can like really tell that this is where this part of the jacket ends, and then it kind of wraps around and ends in this shadow. And I would also like to remove this rim light here, because it just doesn't make sense to me that if the light is coming from here, it would hit down here. By the way, this is like all I'm doing is just thinking about what makes sense. And it doesn't always have to make like perfect sense, by the way. It doesn't have to be super realistic, but because after all, this is a painting and this is our interpretation of something real, or in this case, it's a video game character, but you know what I mean. It has to be believable, right? It doesn't have to be super realistic, but it does have to be believable. So definitely think about like what makes sense in terms of where does the light come from, where would it hit. I'm sure some of the things I did here in my paint over don't technically make a lot of sense, but if they're believable enough, that's enough. And then maybe we can add a little seam here, just a little bit of detail, like very rough detail, because then we can also convey a little bit more 3D-ness. Could also change the eyes a little bit, because I know you can really tell how textured this brush is if you zoom in. That's why I usually don't use this for portrait paintings. But I think you could actually make the eyes a little bit lighter and a little bit more dramatic. I think I will change to a softer brush for this, because that will not show up with the brush I currently use. The original character does have like very light gray eyes that look very otherworldly, right? Because I think he's a vampire, right? So you can really add more of that fantasy element. And usually in my portraits, the darkest areas will be around the eyes, because I really want that contrast. I want the eyes to be perceived. And then around the nose here, usually also kind of dark, but subtle, right? It's not a huge shadow. It's like a little bit of darkness here. And yeah. All right, let's stop here. This is what I would do to this painting, she says, and keeps painting. Because I would love to go on and on and on and on and on. And it's already very good the way that you did it, right? It's not like I did anything like super dramatic to it. You already had such a solid base. All right, that is my overpaint. Let's look at the before, and here's the after. So overall, what I did is, first of all, I softened some of the shapes up and chose the shapes and the planes in the face a little bit more intentionally. I also simplified the shapes a lot, if you can tell. I also removed some of the contrast. I lightened a lot of the areas up. And the other thing that I did is make sure that the rim light is not as flat and just actually wraps around the form a little bit more. Yeah. Oh, and the mouth. We moved the mouth a little bit. I hope this helped. I hope this wasn't too rambly, and I hope I sounded like I somewhat know what I'm talking about. Please give me some feedback now if this was helpful, if there's anything I can improve, which I'm sure I can. That's it. Thank you very, very much for sending this in and trusting me with your wonderful artwork. And if anyone watching this wants to submit their artwork and wants to receive some critique and a paint over like this, you know, just reach out, let me know what you'd like to work on, and I'm happy to do a video like this for you. All right, thank you, bye. I just realized that I'm wearing this every time I record a video, so if you are a recurring watcher and you think I only own one piece of clothing, you might be right.